I am Peyton Sullivan. I had just buried my grandmother, Margaret Ellis. She was 78 years old, and we said our goodbyes today at a small cemetery on the outskirts of Seattle. At the funeral, as people began leaving the graveside, her lawyer, Henry Caldwell, pulled me aside. He didn't say much at first. He leaned in close and whispered, "Your grandmother didn't die naturally, Peyton. If you want the truth, come to my office after everyone leaves. But whatever you do, don't tell your parents or your brother. You could be in danger." He didn't wait for my response. He simply walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart racing. I didn't know what to think, but something in his voice compelled me to follow him. I waited until the last car had left the cemetery, then I drove straight to his office. When I arrived, the building was dark, except for a single light in the lobby. There, standing in the shadows by the door, was a man I had never seen before. His eyes held the weight of too much experience, and he was waiting for me. I froze. I didn't know who he was, but I knew everything was about to change. Have you ever felt that moment when you realize the people closest to you might be hiding something terrible? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever had that gut feeling about family, hit like and subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. After the graveside service ended, I lingered near the row of cars, pretending to adjust my coat while watching Dad and Laura. They stood a little apart from the others, close to the fresh mound of dirt. I couldn't hear everything, but their voices carried just enough over the damp air. Laura said something quietly, urgent. If she went at the right time. Dad muttered in response, "The papers have to be done before anyone starts asking questions." The words hit me like a cold wind. I didn't catch the rest. They turned away when they saw me looking, but that fragment stuck in my mind. It felt wrong, like a conversation not meant for me. I thought about the little things Grandma had done in the last few months. She kept important papers locked in a drawer she had never locked before. She had changed the lock on her bedroom door once, saying it was just in case, but never explained what she meant. I had brushed it off as old age, but now those moments felt heavier. When we returned to the house in the quiet suburb outside Seattle, Dad called me into the living room. The room still smelled of the casseroles neighbors had brought over. He placed a thick stack of papers on the coffee table and sat across from me. "These are for healthcare and financial power of attorney," he said. "It's so we can take care of things if you ever need help. Grandma would have wanted this." Laura stood beside him, arms folded, her smile soft. "She always talked about making sure you're protected, Peyton. Just sign where the tabs are. It's standard stuff." I picked up the top page. The language was dense, full of legal terms. There was a clause about substitute decision-making if I was deemed unable to manage my affairs. It didn't mention anything about a confession, but the wording felt slippery, like it could mean more than they were letting on. I asked what it covered exactly. Dad waved it off. "Just routine. You don't have to read every line. We're family." I felt Laura's eyes on me the whole time. Her gaze wasn't warm, it was watchful, like she was measuring how much I suspected. I set the papers down and rubbed my eyes. "I'm exhausted from today. Can we do this tomorrow? I just need to rest." Dad nodded, but Laura's smile tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." She touched my shoulder as I left the room, her fingers cold. I went upstairs to my old bedroom, the one Grandma had kept ready for me whenever I visited. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall where she used to hang my childhood drawings. My mind replayed those words at the cemetery. If she went at the right time. It didn't sound like grief, it sounded like calculation. I thought about Grandma's last few weeks. She had been tired, complaining about her heart racing at night. She had stopped drinking her morning tea as often, saying it didn't taste right. I had visited her a week before she passed, and she had pulled me aside in the kitchen. "If anything happens to me, Peyton, promise you'll look after yourself. Don't let them rush you." She never said who they were, but now I wondered. Downstairs, I heard Dad and Laura speaking in low voices again. The house felt too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. I locked my bedroom door, something I had never done before, and lay down. But sleep didn't come. Instead, I kept thinking about the papers on the table. I knew I couldn't sign them without understanding what they really meant. The next morning, I woke early. Dad was already in the kitchen making coffee. Laura was there too, pouring a cup for me. She handed it over with a smile. "You must be tired. Drink this. It'll help." I took the cup but didn't sip. I set it on the counter and said I needed to run an errand. Dad asked what kind. I told him I wanted to check on Grandma's house, make sure everything was okay. He hesitated, then nodded. Laura watched me leave, and I felt her eyes on my back the whole way to the door. I drove to Grandma's place, the small house she had lived in for 40 years. It was empty now, the furniture still in place, the air stale. I walked through the rooms, touching the things she loved, the teapot on the stove, the photo albums on the shelf. In her bedroom, I found the drawer she used to keep locked. The lock was still there, but the key remained in the same spot she always hid it, under the loose floorboard near the bed. Inside the drawer were bank statements, insurance papers, and a small notebook. I opened it. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting. She had written dates and notes. The tea tasted bitter again after breakfast. Laura had insisted on making it today. Toward the end of the entry, she had written, "I don't feel safe. If anything happens to me suddenly, check the tea and protect Peyton." My hands shook as I read. I didn't understand everything yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I slipped out of the house that night without turning on any lights. The driveway was quiet as I took Grandma's old key from the hook by the door where she always left it. The drive to Henry Caldwell's office wasn't far, just 20 minutes through the empty suburban streets. When I arrived, the building was dark, except for a single lamp glowing in the lobby window. I parked and walked up to the door. It opened before I knocked. Henry led me inside without a word, straight to his office at the back. The man from earlier was already there, sitting in one of the leather chairs. Henry closed the door and said, "This is Marcus Reed. Your grandmother hired him a few months ago." Marcus nodded but didn't smile. He looked like someone who had spent too many nights waiting for answers. "She came to me because she was worried about something in her daily routine," he said. "She drank herbal tea every morning and started noticing it tasted off. She didn't want to accuse anyone, so she asked me to check it quietly. She was afraid of tearing the family apart if she was wrong." He opened a folder on the desk and slid a report toward me. It was a lab summary from a private testing service. The page listed compounds found in the sample she had sent. Most were normal herbs, but one line was highlighted: "Unidentified substance detected, not consistent with standard herbal composition. Further analysis recommended." It wasn't a final conclusion, nothing definitive, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. I stared at the paper. "This doesn't mean anything yet," I said. "It could be nothing." Marcus leaned forward. "Your grandmother didn't think it was nothing. She told me that if anything happened to her suddenly, I should show this to you. She said you were the only one she trusted to look into it." I shook my head. "My dad loved her. He wouldn't. He couldn't." Henry placed a hand on my shoulder. "She didn't accuse him directly. She just wanted to be sure. That's why she kept this from the police. She didn't want an investigation tearing the family apart." The room felt smaller. My thoughts rushed back to the cemetery, to those half-heard words from Dad and Laura, to the way Laura had watched me all evening. I pictured Grandma's face in her final weeks, pale and tired, still forcing a smile when I visited. She had hugged me tighter than usual, like she was saying goodbye. Marcus closed the folder. "We don't have proof yet, but she wanted you to know. If you decide to dig deeper, I'll help. If not, walk away now." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to go home and pretend none of this was real, but another part, the part that remembered Grandma's quiet warnings, knew I couldn't. I looked at Marcus. "What do we do next?" He didn't respond immediately. He studied me, as if waiting to see how far I was willing to go. I sat there in the quiet office, the lamp casting long shadows across the desk. Marcus waited, patient but not pushing. Henry stood by the window, arms folded, watching the street outside as rain began tapping against the glass. I thought about Grandma's kitchen, the way she used to pour tea into her favorite chipped cup. She always said it brought good luck. Now it felt like everything she touched had been poisoned. I finally spoke. "Show me the sample she sent you." Marcus reached into his bag and pulled out a small sealed pouch. Inside was a plastic vial containing a few tea leaves and a powdery residue. She collected this from her last batch. The lab found the anomaly, but they need more time for full testing. She didn't want to wait. I turned the vial over in my hands. The leaves looked ordinary, but knowing where they came from made my skin crawl. She really believed this was happening to her. She did. She wrote everything down: dates, times, how she felt after each cup. She was methodical. That's why she hired me, to protect you if she couldn't. Henry cleared his throat. She left instructions for you, Peyton. If you want them, they're in the safe. But once you take them, there's no turning back. I looked at the report on the desk, its words cold and clinical. I thought about Dad carrying Grandma's groceries, laughing at her jokes. Could that same man be hiding something this dark? The thought made me feel sick. Then Laura's face flashed in my mind, her watchful eyes, her perfect smile, and those words at the cemetery. They weren't about grief, they were about timing. I took a breath. I want to see what she left. Henry nodded and walked to the safe in the corner. He spun the dial and pulled out a small envelope. My name was written on the front in Grandma's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a flash drive. The note read, "Peyton, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Trust Marcus. He knows the truth. The drive has recordings and notes. Don't let them take everything from you. Love, Grandma." My hands shook as I held the envelope. Marcus watched me closely. "You ready for this?" I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. If this story has you hooked so far, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you don't miss what happens next. Marcus handed me the notebook, and I opened it carefully. The pages were filled with Grandma's familiar handwriting, neat and slightly slanted, the same way she used to write birthday cards. She never named anyone directly. Instead, she used phrases that made sense only now. The one who pours the tea isn't the person I trusted anymore. Each cup brings a new kind of ache. She described the symptoms in quiet detail. Mornings when her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the cup. Afternoons when her hair fell out in clumps in the brush. Nights when her heart raced like it was trying to escape her chest. She wrote about saving small amounts of tea leaves after each batch, hiding them in a tin under the sink. One entry read, "The taste changed again today, bitter, almost metallic. I pretended to drink it all, but poured some into a vial when no one was looking." She mentioned sending samples to Marcus for private testing. "I can't go to the authorities yet. Family is fragile. If I'm wrong, I'll lose everything." Toward the end, the writing grew shakier. "They want the house and the money."
"Peyton, don't let them take you to. You're the only one who might see through this." She didn't say who they were, but the meaning was clear. She ended with a single line. "If I leave suddenly, promise you'll look after yourself. And Ethan, he doesn't know." I closed the notebook, my throat tight. She was protecting us, I realized, even when she was sick. Marcus nodded. She was. She knew something was wrong, but didn't want to believe it was someone close. That's why she kept it quiet. He explained what he had pieced together. Dad had made some bad investments a few years back, real estate deals that fell through. Laura had pushed him to borrow more, promising quick returns. The debt had grown, and Grandma was the only one who knew the full extent. She had quietly helped him before, paying off smaller amounts, but this time it was too much. She suspected Laura was manipulating the situation, encouraging Dad to take risks he couldn't afford. "The house is worth a lot," Marcus said, "and her insurance policy names your dad as beneficiary, with you and Ethan next in line. If something happened to her and then to you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I thought about Ethan. He was only 28, still figuring out his life. Dad and Laura had kept him out of family discussions about the will. They told him it was adult stuff, but I had seen the way he looked at them, confused, sensing something was off but unable to pinpoint it. They were controlling him too. "He doesn't know about any of this," I said. Marcus agreed. "Your grandmother mentioned him. She was worried he'd get caught in the middle." I sank back in the chair, the notebook still in my lap. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. I pictured Grandma alone in her kitchen, pouring tea she couldn't trust, writing these words in secret. She had carried all of this by herself to protect us. "What if we can prove it?" I asked Marcus. He leaned forward. We need more than a notebook and a partial lab report. We need to catch them in the act, or at least get solid evidence. But it's risky. If they suspect you're onto them, they'll move faster. I knew what he meant. If Dad and Laura thought I was a threat, they might try to silence me the same way they had Grandma. I thought about the papers they wanted me to sign, the power of attorney that gave them control over everything. If I signed, I'd be handing them the keys to my future and Ethan's. I can't let that happen. Not to Ethan, not to Grandma's memory. Marcus studied me for a moment. Then we need a plan, but you have to be sure. Once we start, there's no turning back. I nodded. I was sure. He outlined the basics. I would return home, act normal, pretend I was still grieving and trusting them. We would use the time to gather more evidence, maybe set up a way to monitor the house or uncover more from the papers. Grandma had left instructions for that too, hidden in the envelope. I opened the flash drive on Henry's computer. It contained audio files. Grandma's voice, weak but clear, recording her symptoms day by day. One clip was from her last week. The tea was stronger today. I barely finished it. My chest hurts. Peyton, if you're hearing this, remember I love you. Don't let them win. Her voice broke at the end. I closed the file, tears burning my eyes. Henry watched me. She recorded those for you. She wanted you to know she fought. I wiped my face. She did, and I'm going to finish what she started. Marcus stood. Then let's get to work. I left the office with the notebook and drive tucked in my bag. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy. I drove home slowly, my mind racing. Dad and Laura would be waiting. I had to play my part perfectly. When I walked through the door, the house was quiet. Dad was in the living room, flipping through channels. Laura was in the kitchen. She looked up when I entered. "Everything okay, Peyton?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just needed some air." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on my bag a second too long. I went upstairs and locked my door. Tomorrow, I would act as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything had. I walked back into the house with the notebook and drive hidden in my bag, trying to keep my face calm. Dad was in the living room, scrolling on his phone. Laura came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, wearing that same careful smile. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Yeah, just needed to think." I sat down on the couch and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about the papers," I said. "I'll sign them. But first, let's do something for Grandma. I want us to have dinner tonight, read through her draft will together, talk about her, remember the good times. It feels right." Dad looked surprised, then nodded. "That's a good idea, Peyton. She'd like that." Laura's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "We can do that. What do you need?" I suggested we make her favorite meal, roasted chicken with fresh herbs, the way she always did it. We should go to the big market downtown. They have the best fresh produce. "I'll come with you," Dad said immediately. Laura hesitated. "It's a bit far. We could just go to the local store." "No," I said. "Grandma always said fresh makes the difference. Please, let's do it right." They exchanged a quick look. Dad shrugged. "Fine, let's go now." We drove to the market in downtown Seattle, the big one with wide aisles and specialty sections. It was about 40 minutes from the house. Laura sat in the front, glancing back at me now and then. I pretended not to notice. Inside, I took my time. I walked slowly through the produce section, picking up bunches of rosemary and thyme, smelling each one. "This one smells better," I said, holding up a bundle. Laura sighed, but said nothing. I asked the clerk about the best herbs for roasting, then moved to the meat counter, asking about organic chicken and cooking times. The clerk explained for 10 minutes. Laura tapped her foot impatiently. In the wine aisle, I read labels carefully. "Grandma liked this Cabernet. Do you think it's the right vintage?" Dad nodded absent-mindedly. Laura checked her watch. "We should head back soon." "Just a little longer," I said. "I want this to be perfect." I stretched it out for almost 2 hours.
Laura grew impatient. Her smile faded. Dad tried to hurry me, but I kept finding new things to examine. By the time we left, the sky was dark. On the drive home, Laura was quiet, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. When we pulled into the driveway, she turned to me. "You seem different today, Peyton. Everything okay?" I smiled, simply trying to honor Grandma. She didn't look convinced. Inside, I went upstairs to my room and checked the bag. Everything was still there. I knew Marcus's team had only had a short window while we were gone. They had managed to install cameras in the kitchen and one in the living room corner. It wasn't perfect, only 2 angles, but it was something. The risk was high. If Laura or Dad noticed anything out of place, it would be over. I sat on the bed, heart pounding. I had bought us time, but the tension was already building. Laura's eyes followed me the entire trip, as if she were trying to figure out what I knew. Dad seemed oblivious, but I wondered how much he truly understood. I thought about Ethan. He had texted me earlier, asking if I was okay. I hadn't replied yet. I didn't want to pull him into this until I was sure, but seeing how Dad and Laura kept him away from family decisions made me uneasy. They were controlling him too, in their own way. I looked at the notebook again. Grandma's words stared back at me. Don't let them take you too. I wouldn't. Tomorrow, I would play along, but that night, I locked my door and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I went downstairs and found Laura in the kitchen making coffee. Dad was outside checking the mail. I sat at the table and said, I'm ready to sign the papers today, but I want to make sure everything is clear first. I'd like us to go over them together. Laura's face brightened. Of course, I'll get them. She left the room and returned with the stack. We spread the papers across the table. I asked questions about each page, pretending to be confused. What does this part about substitute decision-making mean? I asked. It's just in case you're ever unable to handle things yourself, Laura replied. We'd step in to help. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. I just want to be sure. Dad came in and sat down. We went through the documents line by line. I dragged it out, asking for explanations on every clause. Laura's patience wore thin, but she answered. Dad seemed relieved that I was cooperating. When we finished, I signed where they pointed. My hand shook slightly, but I hid it. There, I said. It's done. Laura smiled. Thank you, Peyton. This will make things easier. I'm going to rest now, I said. See you later. I went back to my room. The cameras were in place, the papers were signed. Now all I had to do was wait for them to make their next move. I woke early, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I lay in bed for a few minutes, breathing slowly, preparing my face. When I went to the kitchen, Dad was already gone, probably running errands. Laura was there, rinsing dishes from the night before. She looked up when I entered. Morning, Peyton. You look tired. I am, I said, rubbing my eyes. I didn't sleep well. Grandma's been on my mind. She nodded sympathetically. That's normal. Want some tea? I can make her favorite herbal blend. I sat at the table. Yes, please, just like she used to make it. Laura turned to the stove, filled the kettle, and set it on the burner. I watched her back as she reached for the tin of loose tea leaves. The kettle clicked as it heated. She moved carefully, deliberately. I pretended to check my phone, but my eyes never left her. When the kettle whistled, she poured the water over the leaves in the teapot. Then she stepped slightly out of my line of sight near the counter by the spice rack. I heard a faint clink, something small being opened. I stood and walked quietly toward the sink, pretending to get a glass of water. As I passed the counter, I saw it. Laura held a small glass vial, tipping a pinch of white powder into the teapot. Her movements were quick and practiced. My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze for a second, then kept moving. She didn't notice me. I filled the glass, took a sip, and returned to the table. Laura turned with the teapot and 2 cups. She poured one for me first. Here you go, she said, setting it down. Careful, it's hot. I wrapped my hands around the cup. Steam rose, carrying the familiar herbal scent. I lifted it toward my lips, my hands shaking, then lowered it again. Sorry, I'm still clumsy this morning. I set it down too fast. The cup tipped, tea spilling across the table and onto the floor. Laura jumped back. Oh no, she said. I'm so sorry. I'm such a mess. Can you make another one? Please, I really need it. Laura stared at the spill for a moment. Her jaw tightened, but she forced a smile. Of course, let me clean this up first. She grabbed a towel and wiped the table. I helped, my hands shaking for real now. She refilled the kettle and started over. This time I stayed closer, watching every move. When she thought I wasn't looking, she reached for the vial again. The powder went in, just a small amount, but enough.
She poured the second cup and handed it to me. "Try this one." I took it. My fingers shook so badly the tea sloshed. I brought it close, the heat touching my lips. For a moment, I thought about drinking it, just to see if she would stop me. I didn't. I set it down carefully. "Thanks, Laura. I'll sip it in a bit." She studied me. "Sure you're okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just tired." I sat back down. The cup steamed in front of me. I knew Marcus was watching through the camera in the kitchen corner, but the angle was limited. It showed the counter, but not perfectly. If she had moved faster, or if I hadn't stepped closer, the evidence might not have been enough. The risk felt enormous. Laura returned to the sink, rinsing the teapot. I stared at the cup. It looked harmless, but I knew better now. My hands still shook. I thought about Grandma, how many times she had sat at this same table drinking something she didn't trust. I needed to end this soon. I stood and walked into the living room. Dad was back, sitting on the couch. He looked up. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just having some tea." He nodded and went back to his phone. I sat across from him. Laura joined us a minute later, carrying her own cup. She sat beside Dad. "You should drink it before it gets cold." I picked up the cup again, my hand trembling. I pretended to blow on it, then set it down. "Actually, I think I'll wait. My stomach's not great." Laura's smile tightened. "Suit yourself." I stayed there, talking about nothing. Neighbors, errands, anything to fill the silence. Dad seemed relaxed. Laura kept glancing at my cup. I knew she was waiting for me to drink it. The camera recorded everything, but the angle still worried me. Marcus had warned me. If the powder wasn't clearly visible, it might not be enough. I needed more proof. I thought about Ethan. He was upstairs, probably still asleep. I hadn't seen him since last night. Dad and Laura kept him out of everything, told him the will was private, but he was family too. I excused myself and went upstairs. Ethan's door was closed. I knocked softly. He opened it, looking sleepy. "Hey, you okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just checking on you." He rubbed his eyes. "Mom and Dad are acting weird. They keep asking if you've talked to me about the papers," I said. "Yeah, they're pushing me to sign things. I'm handling it." He frowned. "What stuff?" "Nothing important," I lied. "Just family things." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push.
"Let me know if you need help." I hugged him quickly. "I will." Back downstairs, Laura was waiting. "You should drink your tea," she said. "It'll help you relax." I picked it up again. This time, I pretended to take a sip. The liquid touched my lips, but I didn't swallow. "Tastes a little off," I said. Laura's face changed for a moment. Then she smiled. "Maybe it's the new blend," she said. I nodded. "Maybe." I knew the camera had caught it, but the risk was still there. One more step, and I could end this. I stood from the table, my hands steady now despite the pounding in my chest. The tea sat untouched in front of me. Laura watched closely, her smile gone. Dad looked up from his phone, confused. Grandma knew everything. My voice was clear. She left a notebook and samples. She knew what was happening. Laura's face went pale. Dad froze. "Peyton, what are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the app Marcus had set up. The live feed from the kitchen camera appeared. I turned the screen toward them. "Watch this." The video showed Laura at the counter earlier, the vial in her hand, the white powder falling into the teapot. It was clear. The angle captured her movements perfectly. Laura's breath caught. Dad stared at the screen, color draining from his face. "That's not... I didn't... Daniel, tell her it's not what it looks like," Laura stammered. Dad didn't speak. He just kept staring at the video, mouth open. I continued. "She wrote it all down, the symptoms, the bitter taste, the way you both acted. She knew you wanted the house, the insurance, everything." Laura's eyes darted to Dad. "Daniel, say something." He finally looked at me. "Peyton, I didn't know, I swear." Laura laughed, a sharp, panicked sound. "He's lying. He planned it all. I just went along because he threatened me." Dad shook his head. "No, Laura, stop." I didn't let them argue.
The papers you had me sign, they weren't just power of attorney, they were an end-of-life directive, giving you the right to make medical decisions for me if I was incapable. You wanted to declare me unfit, take control, and cut me out of the inheritance. Laura lunged for the phone. Turn that off. I pulled it back. It's too late. The footage is already saved, and the police are watching right now. At that moment, the front and back doors burst open. Officers in uniform rushed in, guns drawn, hands visible. Laura screamed and dropped to the floor, hands over her head. Dad raised his arms slowly, eyes wide. Two officers cuffed Laura first. She kept shouting, "It was him! He made me do it!" Dad didn't resist. He just looked at me, broken. "Peyton, I'm sorry," he said. I didn't respond. Ethan came running down the stairs, hair messy from sleep. He stopped at the bottom, staring at the chaos. "What's happening?" One officer held him back gently. "Stay here, son." Ethan looked at me. "Peyton, what's going on?" "They hurt Grandma. They tried to hurt me too," I said. His face crumpled. "No!" Dad couldn't meet his eyes. The officers read their rights. Laura kept blaming Dad, her voice shrill. Dad stayed silent, head down. As they led them out, Ethan grabbed my arm. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know anything." I believed him. He had been kept in the dark, just like Grandma wanted to protect him. The house filled with police activity, photos, evidence bags, statements. Marcus arrived later, coordinating with detectives. He gave me a small nod. "You did good." I didn't feel good. I felt empty. They took Dad and Laura away. Ethan sat with me on the couch while the officers worked. He cried quietly. I held his hand. When the last officer left, the house was silent again. Ethan looked at me. "What happens now?" I took a breath. "We get through it together, but I can't stay here anymore." He nodded. "I understand." I packed a bag that night. I left the house the next morning without looking back. Months later, the courtroom in Seattle felt colder than the cemetery where we buried Grandma. The judge's voice echoed as he read Daniel Ellis's sentence: life imprisonment without parole for his role as the primary orchestrator. Laura received a reduced sentence due to less direct evidence and her cooperation. The charges centered on causing harm leading to Grandma's death and conspiracy to harm me. The courtroom was quiet except for soft sobs from a few relatives in the back. Ethan sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly. He hadn't spoken much since the arrest. I looked at Dad one last time as they led him away. He didn't look back. Laura glanced over her shoulder, eyes red, but I turned away. There was nothing left to say. After the hearing, Ethan and I walked out together. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky gray and heavy. He stopped on the courthouse steps. "Peyton, I'm sorry. I should have seen it." I said, "You didn't know. None of us did. Grandma protected us both." He nodded slowly. "What now?" I took a breath. "I'm moving to Portland. I need space. I'll keep Grandma's house, but I can't live there anymore, not after everything that happened." He looked down. "Can we still talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Minimal contact, no visits, but yes, we can talk. You're my brother. That doesn't change." He hugged me tightly. "Thank you." I drove to Grandma's house that afternoon. The keys felt heavy in my hand. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture she loved, the teapot on the stove, the photo albums on the shelf. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a place that needed purpose again. I decided to turn it into a safe haven for women escaping domestic abuse. I worked with local organizations to set it up: bedrooms for short-term stays, counseling space in the living room, and a garden out back where they could sit and breathe. I used part of the inheritance to fund it. Grandma would have wanted that. She always said the house was meant to shelter people, not just hold memories. I moved to Portland a few weeks later, finding a small, simple apartment near the river. I started a new job at a nonprofit helping families with financial planning in crisis. Every day felt a little easier. I don't talk to Dad or Laura. The court ordered no contact, and I didn't fight it. Ethan calls sometimes, short conversations about his life, his job. Nothing deep. We're careful. We're trying. I still think about Grandma every day. She fought in silence to protect us. She left the clues, the notebook, the drive, because she believed I would find them. She was right. Greed can destroy a family. It can turn people you love into strangers. But the truth always finds a way out, even when it hurts the most. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away to protect yourself, honor those who fought for you, and build something better from the pieces left behind. I keep Grandma's teapot on my shelf. It reminds me that some things are worth saving and some things are worth letting go. Ollie, part 5 is now fully polished. If you want, I can now go back and insert a soft CTA line in the middle of the story for parts 2 or 3, as you requested earlier, making it natural and in bold, ready for YouTube use. Do you want me to do that next?